Good morning, everyone. I hope you are enjoying a tasty cup of coffee. My name is Álvaro Palacios, and I am Solution Architect for OEM at Qlik, which means I have the pleasure of looking after the OEM business and partners in EMEA who deliver analytics to their end customers using Qlik technology. Today, I'm going to start this session with an overview of authentication options in Qlik Cloud, an overview of the security model, then show you the steps needed to set up JWT Authorization, and last but not least, a list of resources for you to get started quickly. Okay, let's begin. When you create a new tenant in Qlik Cloud, by default, it's configured with Qlik's own IDP, and users can be invited by email. Then you have the option to set up a custom IDP compatible with the OIDC protocol. For example, Okta 0, Salesforce, Azure Active Directory, Keycloak, Google Identity, etc. But if you don't have one and you want to leverage your existing authentication module and existing user attributes, we can also set up a JWT IDP in Qlik Cloud, which enables automatic logins, removing the need of presenting user credentials manually in the Qlik login page. Qlik Cloud ingests the user information and propagates it to multiple components. Using a properly configured identity provider, upon authentication, a user's metadata, including their user ID and group information, can be fed into two principal areas: spaces and apps. Spaces, ultimately, are just collections of stuff. In Qlik Cloud, these elements are treated as first-class citizens and can be consumed equally. The primary component to space is an app, but as we see here, we also have elements like charts which have been monitored from Qlik apps. Data connections, likewise, live inside of a space, as well as links and catalog datasets. But the key takeaway is that the same identity is being used for both access to resources as well as access to columns or rows when using Qlik's technique for column and or row level security section access. Now, let's get started with the setup. Before anything else, you need to install OpenSSL to be able to create a public-private key pair for signing JWT tokens. You are going to need Node.js to install all the necessary project dependencies when you download the code from the corresponding GitHub repo. And you're going to need the tenant admin access to your Qlik Cloud tenant to create a new web integration and the JWT identity provider through the management console. So now I'm going to download the Qlik Cloud JWT project available online in our GitHub repository. Make sure you unzip the file in your computer to have access to the project files. All the steps I'm going to take during this demo are well documented in a more detailed way at qlik.dev. Look for the Implement JWT Authorization tutorial to know more about this. Next, in the Setup section, there is a link pointing to another tutorial at qlik.dev that shows the SSL commands to create a public-private key pair for signing JWT tokens. Copy the first command and open the command line in your computer in the root folder of the project. Now, create a new folder called data, change to this new data directory, and then execute the first SSL command. Now execute the second SSL command from the tutorial. You can enter some field values or just leave them empty. That will create the certificate inside the data folder. In the source folder, you have the file hosting the HTTPS web server for this application. Open now the project with Visual Studio Code or a similar IDE. Then look for the server.js file to make some adjustments. This code is created with an HTTP server on port 8080. We're going to change that to an HTTPS to be able later in this demo to view embedded content that is hosted in Qlik Cloud. Make sure to comment out line 42. Now, we need to create a server certificate using another SSL command. You can see that in the screen now. The certificate will be stored in the same directory as the server.js file. Now you can see the two certificates in the folder. Now, open the token.js file stored in the token folder. We need to change line number 5 with the right relative path, file name, and extension for the private certificate that we just generated. Now open the config.js file located in the config folder. Here, we need to configure the web integration ID, tenant domain, app ID, object ID, the issuer, and the key ID. For that, now we need to navigate to your Qlik Cloud tenant. Make sure you access your Qlik Cloud tenant with a user that is tenant admin. Then click on the launcher menu on the upper right corner and go to the management console. If you scroll down under integration, click on the web icon. And now create new. Fill the name and allow the origin hosting the JWT authorization code to communicate with your Qlik Cloud tenant. That is your web server HTTPS localhost 8080. Next, click on the identity provider under configuration and create new. Now select JWT type from the dropdown, then copy and paste the value of your public certificate in the corresponding field. The issuer and the key ID is optional, but I'm going to give it a user-friendly name for my demo. When you are done, click on Create, the green button, and don't forget to copy the values to the clipboard. Then save this information in a notepad or something similar. Now let's go back to the config.js file. And let's start configuring the corresponding values from line 11 to 18. To get the tenant domain, go to the browser and copy it from the browser's URL. For the Qlik web integration ID, you can go back to the management console and get it directly from there. For the app ID and the object ID, navigate to the hub and select any application you like. In my case, I'm going to select this customer dashboard application. When you open this application, from the URL in the browser, you can get the app ID. Copy that value and paste it in the app ID property. Then choose any visualization object from the screen that you want to embed. Click on the three ellipses, click Share and Embed. You will see the object ID shown below the visualization preview. Now finish with the issuer and the key ID we obtain after generating the JWT identity provider. Now go back to the token.js file to make some changes. Add a new library in line number 4 and add a new property, the GTI, in the payload as suggested in our documentation at qlik.dev. Also, and very importantly, add the not before property in the signing options. Set the value to minus 30 seconds. This means the JWT token will be valid 30 seconds before the time it was issued. Finally, open the server.js file and modify the groups property. Here I'm going to hard code the value, but in a real life scenario, you will have this information flowing from your authentication module. Add a console log to display the generated token. And now we should be ready. Open your command line, change directory to the root directory, install all the project dependencies with the command npm install. And when that is completed, start your server. Remember the server.js is in the source folder. The server is now listening on localhost port 8080. Go back to the browser and type that address. Now you see a successful user login with JWT because there is a response to an API request we are sending from the front-end code. However, the Nebula chart created on the fly and the embedded visualization with an iframe don't work yet. Now, if you go back to the browser and refresh, you're going to see that you are logged in with a JWT user. Remember that this user only belongs to the demos group, so he only has access to the demos managed space. Now we're gonna log out and log in with the tenant admin to do some configurations in the management console to fix the problems with the embedded charts. For the iframe, we need to go back to the management console and configure a content security policy to allow frame ancestors from our origin hosting the iframe, which is again localhost port 8080. Now, if you open the app.js file located in the source folder, in line 32, we are defining the iframe source URL. Line 36 to 39 creates the actual iframe in the HTML body. For the Nebula chart on the fly, again in the app.js file, find line number 24 and use a dimension and measure based on fields that exist in your Qlik application. Save all the fields that you just modified and restart your server. Go back to the browser, navigate to or type localhost 8080, and now all problems should be gone. The Nebula chart is correctly displayed, as well as the embedded visualization that exists inside my customer dashboard application. If you navigate to your Qlik Cloud tenant, you can see that we are already logged in with a JWT user. If we inspect the generated JWT token using the website jwt.io, we can see that the user information displayed in Qlik Cloud matches with the values in the sub and name properties of the token. If we navigate to the catalog from the space dropdown, you can see this user only have access to the demos managed space as expected. This is because the demos group was injected previously in the tenant with another user login. We call that the master login. And this group, the demo group, was added as a member with access to view and contribute. If I open the application, you are going to notice that we can only view data for France and Germany. Now let's try to understand why this is happening. If I do an interactive login with my personal user, Alvaro, we're going to check first the managed space details. So you're going to see this user, Alvaro, and all the users that belong to the demos group to have access to this space. But now, if we open the copy of the customer dashboard application that we have in the development space for development purposes, now this user can view all data for all countries. And that's because in the data load script, we have included a security table called section access to define restrictions or access to the data. You can see this table that all users belonging to the group demos are restricted. They can only view data related to France and Germany. The column yearly salary is also hidden for them. Then the user Alvaro is type admin. That means this user is authorized to see all data. If we wanted the JWT users to have access to other spaces, we could add multiple values to the group's property in the JWT token. Defining multiple values here allow us to simulate a master login. A master login injects all group values in your Qlik Cloud tenant. Alternatively, in the platform operation tutorial at qlik.dev, you will find the Postman collection with the API calls for tenant creation, configuration, hydration, presented by Jacob 2 weeks ago. If you download this collection and import in your Postman, the first thing you need to check is the collection variables. There is a variable called master groups, meant for this purpose, injecting your groups. Then in 3.6.2, we are using the value stored in this variable for the payload in the token, before finally sending the JWT request for authentication in 3.7. Okay, I'm done with the demo. Now a quick summary of the steps needed to implement JWT authorization in your own project. First, we need to inject all groups from your authentication mechanism into your Qlik Cloud tenant. For that, we're going to simulate a master login. A master login is just a regular user login, but we're going to include all the group values into the payload of the JWT token. You can use example code or the Postman collection available in GitHub for this. Second, you need to put security in the managed spaces based on the groups that are now available in your Qlik Cloud tenant. Next, you're going to put security in apps for data access based on those groups. I'm referring to the section access table. Fourth, we're going to make all the necessary configurations in your Qlik Cloud tenant, and I'm referring now to generating the web integration ID, configuring a new JWT IDP, and configuring content security policy if that's needed to view embedded content in the example code, for example. And last but not least, we need to implement the JWT authorization code in your platform or customer portal. For that, you can rewatch this webinar on demand or use the step-by-step tutorial available at qlik.dev. If you enjoyed this session and now you want to get your hands dirty, here you will find all the links and resources pointing to our official documentation, step-by-step guides and working examples in GitHub. Now I've spoken enough. Thank you for listening, and it's time for Q&A.